Hello, everyone, and welcome in. I am Aaron St. Denis. You can find me at FF Mad Scientist. I am joined by Coach Craig today. What's your Twitter handle? You don't have it on there.
It's at Coach Craig Sport for Twitter, but for YouTube, it's Coach Craig Sports. You just couldn't have enough characters on Twitter back in the day. I don't know if they ever changed that or not, though.
I think they did. I see a lot of long handles, but regardless, this is the Mad Science Lab podcast brought to you by the combination of Fantasy Football Universe and the Fantasy Football Advice Network. Today, we're back with another edition of Risers and Fallers. Like I said, my guest is Coach Craig. Coach, thanks for joining me. How's it going?
It's going all right. Kind of a couple days off for me now, which is big change since I work too much all the time anyways.
I hear you. I found since I got divorced, I don't get time off. I'll sit here and I'll have free time and I'll just invent things to do. That's why I'm so productive for fantasy football. I'll be sitting here on the couch and I'm like, well, I don't want to sit here by myself. So let's go write something or let's do another podcast. So
Yep.
I'm hyper productive out of boredom and free time.
Yeah, right now I got the NBA All-Star break. I put NBA DFS out pretty much every day, Monday through Friday. But since there's like a week off, it kind of worked out well to come on here for this then.
See, I don't do basketball. I'm a really big hockey fan, but I don't do any content for hockey really. Like I play fantasy, but I don't do content for it. So I'm basically just rookies up until March when we got March Madness going on. Then I sidetrack from March Madness a bit, and then it's right back to rookies in the draft. But
yeah, I've been doing a lot of prep work for the UFL, the United Football League, too, for spring football this year, too.
Did I ask you to tell everyone what you do and where we can find your work? I can't remember.
Not really yet, but so mainly my YouTube channels is going to be the biggest one, Coach Craig Sports. I do pretty much any type of DFS over there, whether it's NFL, NBA, MLB, UFL, as long as DraftKings has it this year, but they had XFL and USFL last year, so I assume they'll have it this year. Last year I started doing some CFL DFS stuff too, since nobody else did it pretty much. So a lot of different stuff with that too. There's some extra stuff you can find on my Patreon, patreon.com/Coach Craig Sports. Do a little bit of stuff with sports affiliation as well. And then League Winners is still kind of there too. I'll probably do a little bit of best ball headed into next year, I would assume too, at some point.
You are pretty much into the opposite things of me, with the exception of the one, like I don't do any DFS whatsoever. I hate it. I just can't stand it. I don't really watch USFL or whatever it's called now. I watched some XFL back because I was a wrestling fan. The only thing I have watched is the CFL because I'm Canadian, but with the exception of that, I don't watch any of that. And even the CFL, I really watch more college football than CFL. So
hey, CFL was pretty good last year. I'm not gonna lie. Just kind of following along, and there's a lot of pretty good talented players there. They got a lot of really good kick and punt returners right now in the league.
it's just such a weird thing to watch. It's like someone got really hammered and said, let's make up football with really stupid rules. It's kind of like what the XFL did, except I think the CFL is more fun, honestly. But anyways, we've been sidetracked. Let's start here. We've got your first riser. It is, of course, bear with me here for a second. I forgot a step in my process. I normally go to the sleeper page to bring up their stats, and naturally, I have clicked on the wrong one, and I just X'd off Chase Brown. So give me about 3 seconds here to bring up Chase. No, I'm not. This is annoying. What's going on here? I love dead air time. This is podcasting at its best, my friend.
Yep.
Chase Brown. There we go. Chase Brown. In his rookie season, he was running back 63. He had 44 attempts for 179 yards, 0 touchdowns, 14 receptions for 156 yards, and his lone touchdown was through the air. So that's nice to see. I hate KTC, keep trade cut, but for the offseason, at this point in the offseason, I like to see where the general public has him valued. They have him 155th overall, valued at RB38. The interesting thing here is Fantasy Pros has him valued 23 spots higher overall at 132 in single quarterback leagues. So 132 compared to 155, but 2 RB slots later. So it looks like on Fantasy Pros, there's just a whole lot. The experts are a whole lot heavier into the running backs. So where do you have him valued and where do you think he goes?
Yeah, so the expert, so like I was saying the other day, I was looking at expert consensus rankings, and he was about running back 40 in Dynasty. I think he should probably be somewhere like in the 30s right now. Obviously, there are factors that could change that. Joe Mixon is going to be 28 years old this year. He's on the last year of his deal. They can cut him and save $6.1 million. So that is a very realistic option for the Bengals. They might move on from him. Maybe they use that money to try to keep T. Higgins around if they don't want to draft a young wide receiver, try to bring in somebody a little bit cheaper. Or, maybe they use that money somewhere else too. They got a couple different cap
What was the
casualties that they can go about.
what was the report today? The report was Mixon's a cap casualty. They're going to franchise Higgins and let Boyd walk, is what apparently came out of Cincinnati camp today. I don't know how accurate it is, and I don't even remember who it was. It might have been Schefter, but apparently that's the scenario, he said.
Yeah, and then I think it's pretty much guaranteed that DJ Reader will be a cap casualty at some point too. So
Yeah.
he's coming off another serious injury, which is kind of sad as a former Texan. I'm a Texans fan, so the couple of major injuries he's had since he's been in Cincinnati is kind of disappointing. But, if they move on from Joe Mixon, Chase Brown, especially later on in the year, he got more involved after he came back from injury. Early on in the year, wasn't playing a ton of snaps. It was that Travion Williams that was getting like kind of the backup run. And then kind of as the season progressed, Chase Brown got more involved. He had at least 7 carries in 4 out of the last 6 games. He had at least 1 reception in the last 5 games, and 4 out of those games he had at least 2. So he was a little bit involved running the ball, catching the ball out of the backfield too. That's like another thing too. Is he's a guy that could handle a workload because he did it at Illinois. First of all, he was the offense at Illinois his last year there, so he's a guy that can handle the carries. He is a guy that, according to most of the guys he practiced with at the Senior Bowl last year in 2023, they voted him the best pass protecting running back at the Senior Bowl that year among his peers. So that is something, the ability to pass protect means you have the ability to be on the field all 3 downs. We saw a decent pass catching profile from this year. He is a pretty good athlete. He had a 9.81 RAS score last year. So a guy that ran a 4.4 or a 4.43 40 time. So he's a guy that can do just a little bit of everything. And the best part too is, free agency is not that strong in running backs this year. There's going to be a lot of guys out there, but we're at the point in time, especially for Dynasty, it's kind of this awkward point in time where there's not that many good running backs out there because all these 2017, that class was so loaded and we got so many guys from that class that became starting running backs, and they're all like 28 years old or older at this point in time. So all those guys are starting to fall off, or they're not getting big deals in free agency. And then the class that we have coming in, there's a lot of question marks around it. There's not a lot of guys that are probably going to be able to threaten a guy like Chase Brown. Like, yeah, they're going to add somebody else probably, but he should be the lead back, if they do move on for Joe Mixon. So I think I typically don't like chasing these guys in Dynasty before free agency and before the draft. So because I'm getting like an echo here.
Oh, are you? I wasn't hearing
but
that's
it
weird.
might just be me.
Here, I'll mute while you talk.
So just in general, I don't like typically chasing these backup running backs that we think are going to ultimately end up being in this better landing spot, because more times than not, it doesn't end up favorable. Like you think like, oh, this guy's going away. Like Zamir White was one last year. Everybody's like, oh, Josh Jacobs is just going to be gone, and then it'll be his job. Might be that this year now, so it might have ended up working out long term. But a lot of those times, those guys get those bumps up in value, and then if you don't get rid of them at that point in time, then they either sign somebody in free agency or they draft a rookie, and then the situation is not as good as it always looks. Or you get like the Elijah Mitchell case where they ended up trading for Christian McCaffrey later on, which whole different story. But sometimes you just got to capitalize, especially running back position in Dynasty. For me, it's turn and burn. So you get a guy late, he shows you a little bit of something, or he looks like he's going to be the starter all of a sudden, you just sell him as high as you can and just kind of keep flipping them. That's the way that I approach it, especially nowadays. 17 game main schedule. These guys splitting, most teams are using some type of 1A, 1B, or, a 1 and a 2 or some type of committee right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like we're doing this again with Zamir White, but you don't have to sell me on Chase Brown. I've been telling everyone's taking Tyjae Spears 6 rounds earlier, and I said, I'll just wait on Chase Brown, but I really started to notice Chase Brown in the fantasy playoffs. A few of my contending teams had Joe Mixon as my flex running back, and I don't know how many times I celebrated a touchdown only to realize it was Chase Brown, and I said, son of a bitch, that's not my guy. Chase Brown has that long 70-yard touchdown, I think it was, where I said, Yes, Joe Mixon, 70. No, it's not Mixon. So I'm with you on that. Let's
Yeah, I
quickly look
mean,
at.
once you realized it was that long a yardage, you probably should have figured it wasn't Joe Mixon because he's
Yeah,
really good at like the 10, 12-yard runs, not as good as the long ones.
fair enough. So we'll look at, it's funny, some of the players we mentioned. We'll look at the range here he's in. He's 40th on Fantasy Pros.
Mhm.
Above him, we've got Khalil Herbert, Zamir White, Devin Singletary. Below him, we have Algier, Dillon, and Pierce. So I'm looking at that group there. Depending, obviously, on what Zamir White's situation is, I think I'd take Chase Brown over all of them. Even Zamir White, I think. Like, I'm out on Algier and Dillon for sure. I don't think I'd want Singletary or Herbert over him. Like I said, the only one would be as if Zamir White gets that backfield to himself, which I don't anticipate. But so where do you fall on Brown in the group of Khalil Herbert, White, Singletary, Brown, Algier, Dillon? So 6 of them. You think he's towards the top of that group he's into?
Yeah, towards the top. I think the top ones for me would be the 3 of Zamir White, him, and Devin Singletary, because Singletary's showing what he can do in this offense. We'll see whether or not the Texans add another piece, but this was not the year that probably a lot of people were hoping for out of Dameon Pierce, but he just does not fit this scheme very well. It's just
Well,
kind of at the end of the day.
Singletary's younger than I thought. He just seems like he's been around for, well, he has been around forever. Oh my God, he's played 5 years. He came in early. He must have come in at 20 because he's just turning 26 now. So maybe, I guess I would elevate Singletary a bit based on the fact that I didn't realize he wasn't at, he's at the age apex right now, but he's not really past it. So, all right, let's move on to your faller. We've got Tony Pollard. Didn't mean for that to rhyme. He's played 5 seasons. He's been RB 53, 41, 28, 8, and 14. He peaked 2 years ago. Last year got the backfield to himself and didn't do nearly as well as we expected. 252 attempts, 1,005 yards, 6 touchdowns, 55 receptions on 67 targets for 311 yards, and no receiving touchdowns, which was interesting. Keep Trade Cut has him as 107 overall, RB 20, which is absolutely weird when you compare it to Fantasy Pros, where he is only 3 ranks higher at RB 17, but he is 53rd overall. So 3 running back spots ahead, and he goes 50 spots earlier. So it just goes to show you the experts on Fantasy Pros are really in love with running backs nowadays. So, what do you think about Pollard here? They have him RB 17. He's a low end RB2 in this range. Where do you see him?
Yep. So I think just in general, when you talk about people in Tony Pollard too, I feel like he's one of those polarizing players. There's always a lot of people that really love him. And they, either like when Zeke was there, they're always like, oh, we want more Tony Pollard. It's always a thing where you always want the backup running back. It seems like whether it's Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Jaylen Warren, you name it. Except for Atlanta, with Tyler Algier getting too many carries, but that's a little different story for a different day. For Pollard, for me, I think there's a lot of question marks about him right now. This is probably last season was the greatest opportunity he's probably going to have in his whole career in terms of touches, because he had almost 320 touches last year, or it was a little less than that. Let's see, because it was 252.
Yeah, it's about 320. It's give or take. I think it's what's that? It might be 319, but
yeah. So
it's 309. It's 309. But either way,
yeah, I was doing targets instead of receptions though when I was first thinking about it. But
so was I. So was I. So you're right. It's 3. Yeah, you're right. I was doing targets as well. My bad.
But he's probably not going to get a 300 touch season again in the rest of his career. So for me personally, if you put him in like the 24, 25 range at running back, probably be more in line with probably where he should be, at least at this point in time. But like, we have no idea where this guy's going to play next year. Is he going to go back to Dallas? Do they want him back at this point in time? Do they just want to move on? There's a lot of question marks. He's going to be 27 this year. He's a guy that's up until this most recent season has never handled a full workload since high school.
I don't think he can handle a full workload, which is why I was out on him from the beginning.
Yeah, so I was surprised he got at least the 300 touches this year, because I didn't think his body could handle that. Yeah. But like, he just hasn't had a full workload since high school. Like at Memphis, people forget that Antonio Gibson, the receiver, that was Tony Pollard before Antonio Gibson, because they had Patrick Taylor and they had Darrell Henderson. Those were the 2 running backs. Gainwell redshirted that year. Then Gainwell and Patrick Taylor were the running backs essentially the next year. They had 5 NFL running backs on a group of 5 school at one point in time. in that running back room. It was Kenny Gainwell, it was Antonio Gibson, it was Patrick Taylor, it was Darrell Henderson, and Tony Pollard. They had 5 NFL running backs in one room at Memphis, which
It's
is kind of
impressive.
crazy when you think about it. I
They
always
have,
have to bring that up anytime it comes up, just because most people probably don't realize that. But I think there's just a lot of concerns because, like we said, we don't know where he's going to play next year, whether it's the Cowboys, whether it's who knows, like at this point in time. I don't think his value is going to be as high, too. And when you look at what he did this year, not even half his games were double digit PPR points. And even the ones that were double digit PPR points, they were all like 12-point games, 14-point games. So it's not like he was giving you a lot of value in general. And out of like those 8 games, 6 or 7 of them were against really, really bad run defenses. And he probably should have killed them even more too. And like, I get it. The Cowboys had a lot of blowouts, but that probably should have helped him out a little bit more than it actually did too
yeah.
at the same time. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you could look at that, but he just feels like this guy that everybody kind of propped up. He didn't really live up to expectations, but he's not really falling down in Dynasty. But I think, we had the people that really love Tony Pollard still. And then I think a lot of people that are like, well, he's not that old, but he's almost, he's going to be 27 this year. It's not like he's at a young age for running back still. So
In
he
the
doesn't have a large workload. He doesn't have a lot of wear on his tires because of, splitting time, if you want to call it that, at Memphis and splitting time in Dallas. So it's just
in
a
his
weird one for me.
in this spot in the rankings, I think he's in the good spot because I think he's in no man's net land where I just don't want a running back, but he feels appropriately valued. Like he's in this group of guys I don't really want any of. Javonte, Swift, Stevenson, Pollard, don't want any of them. And then the ones right below him are the old guys where we don't, Mixon, Henry, Eckler, Chubb. He feels like he's in the right spot there where it's a group of younger guys that haven't really hit their potential and older guys who might be completely done. And I think he fits right around there. And I think that's the point in drafts where if I'm facing those options at running back, I'm pivoting to wide receiver. So I don't see me having a whole lot of shares of him.
I think all those guys you mentioned around him, though, I think I still take every one of them over him, honestly.
The only one I might be, I was going to say Ramondre Stevenson, but he gets more work. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'd take every one of them over him as well. So that just goes to show you he's 18, but more realistically, he's probably a low end RB2, not a mid range, which I think fits more. I think 18 is a bit high, even 20. I think when I do my actual rankings after the draft, I think he's going to fall somewhere in the 24 to 30 range for me. I don't hate him. He's not someone I ever target.
No, like for me, I said he'd probably be around like 24, 25, like if I did like lay it all out today. But I think there's also room that he could drop down even further than that. I think there's depending on his situation where he ends up, he could be right around this 18 to 20 range and be all right. But at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen with free agency. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the draft. We don't know anything about his situation going into next year. And you take the situation as good as it was this year, and he still didn't do it. And then I think a lot of people are still trying to be like, well, he came back from the injury at the end of last year too, so next year he'll be better and all this stuff too. But I don't know if he's actually going to be better or not.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think like in a way it almost looks like he kind of lost a step too, but like the advanced like metrics kind of look interesting. Let's just put it that way, because there's some that look all right. Some of like the yards created and stuff like that still look all right, but then some of the other ones they're not that great.
My worry for him was, I know it's completely healed, but my worry was the broken leg. I've broken bones in sports, and I didn't even play at a competitive level towards the end. And I know what it was like for not just me. I've been in classes for this where I still find myself, it's been 12 years since I broke my arm, and I'll find myself playing sports and guarding the broken leg. And I was worried there's a mental block where you never really trust that part of your body. It never feels right again. And I thought it might take him some time to really trust especially even he looks like he plants differently off that foot. And that really worried me that I don't think he ever got past it. But you want to take a second here to tell us once again where we can find you and your work?
Yeah. So first of all, Twitter, it's at Coach Craig Sport. On YouTube, it's excuse me, I can't talk right now. On YouTube, it's Coach Craig Sports. So mainly on the YouTube, it's just all the DFS stuff, whether it's NFL, NBA, MLB, UFL, CFL, all that good stuff too. I may or may not try to get some draft prospects on and do some interviews again. Once again, this year I did like a handful last year, like 10 or 11 of them, mainly smaller school guys too, just kind of get their name out there on the map, tell their story and all that stuff. So that was a lot of fun, but my schedule's kind of busy right now, so we'll see if we can squeeze that in or not. And then after that, I'm on the sports affiliation as well. Not doing too much right there at this point in time. I'll probably go through, kind of talk some of my NFL draft prospects, though, just kind of the groups, though, quarterback, like running back, wide receiver, kind of go give out like my rankings, whether, it's a top 5, top 10 or anything else like that. I might throw a mock draft in here or there as well at some point in time. And then the league winners probably just do a little bit of best ball content as we get at least past the draft and then closer to the season, I would assume, though.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining me. This has been another edition of Dynasty Risers and Fallers, this time with my guest, Coach Craig. Thank you for joining me. Thank you all for tuning in to the Mad Science Lab podcast, brought to you by the combination of the Fantasy Football Universe and the Fantasy Football Advice Network. Thanks, everyone. Take care and see you next time.